let me introduce today's presenter. Lynn Hawks holds a BA in English and an MA in Education from Stanford University. She's taught English in public and independent schools, has been an instructor in the Duke TIP E-Studies program, and has served as a gifted resource teacher and curriculum consultant. She authors and edits curriculum for independent learning, supervises all course releases, and provides training for educators. She's the author of The Writer's Journey, Volume 1, co-author of The Writer's Journey, Volume 2, and author of the 4th and 5th grade Talent Search Online Opportunity. Story writing, Spin Me a Yarn. So she's done all that. Lynn is co-author of The Compassionate Classroom, Lessons that Nurture Wisdom and Empathy, and Teaching Romeo and Juliet, A Differentiated Approach. Her lessons are featured in A Differentiation in Practice, a resource guide for differentiating curriculum grades 9 through 12. She's also the author of Teaching Julius Caesar, A Differentiated Approach. She writes young adult fiction and maintains a writer's blog called A Writer's Journey. And perhaps we should talk, Lynn, about providing a link to your blog in our follow-up email.
That sounds great. Yeah.
So I am going to, because there is one more question that, as we turn it over to Lynn, that we would like to know. So sort of sense of how long you've been teaching, and then I will move it to Lynn as we move from there. So let me change presenters. And let me give you a moment to fill in the blank. Okay, about 2/3 of you have voted, so I'm going to close the poll so we can move forward and see what Lynn has to say. So, Lynn, I don't know whether you can see this, but 28%, it's very evenly distributed. 28% fewer than 5, 20% between 5 and 10, 26 between 10 and 20, and 26 more than 20. So in the 20s for
everywhere.
each of the
That's
4
great.
decades. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so Lynn, if you share your desktop, it's all yours.
Great. Let me see if everyone can everyone see my screen?
No.
Let's see.
So I'll tell you
How
what.
about this?
There you go. We're good.
Okay, wonderful. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for coming in today. I know a lot of people have a busy day of teaching and lots of office hours and work to do, but I'll try to use your time as well as possible, and I'm really excited to be here. And thank you, Steve, for the great introduction. We have a 7-year anniversary with SoftChalk here at Duke University TIP, and so I'm really excited to talk to you about how we've been using it and how we design lessons here. So, using Bloom's taxonomy of language from the very get-go, what I hope you'll know by the end is a little bit about Duke TIP. You'll get a quick review of Bloom's taxonomy. You'll know how we design lessons here at TIP. But most importantly, you'll see how we're using SoftChalk while providing high-level online learning. So those are the goals. And let's see, my computer is a little slow here. Let's see, I just tapped the space bar. Let me try that again. A little technical difficulty. Let's see. Thanks for your patience. I'm hitting the space bar, Steve, and we are not moving. So remember, we had this little bit of trouble when we tried it before. Let's see. Okay, let me escape out of here and just see if that'll.
Yeah, I had my microphone off, so all the advice I was giving went nowhere.
I just hit. We're sort of in a freeze mode. I wonder.
Yeah. So if maybe you can get out of the PowerPoint for a moment and try to come back in. Yes, we've seen this problem before.
The escape button is no longer working too. So let me. I think it's.
All the planning and rehearsing we do.
Yeah, best laid plans, you know.
You know, right. Best laid plans, and suddenly the system goes, it's not quite working.
Right. Let me give this another couple taps, and then we can try. Maybe we can. Escape's not working. Space bar's not working. Let me try backspace. That's not working either. So.
can you go into your task manager and perhaps sort of kill that application?
Let's see. I'm not getting any. There we go.
Aha!
Next page. All right. We're all looking at the next page. Sorry for the delay, everyone. Here, again, sort of rephrasing what I just said before, but I want to bring up the words knowledge and comprehension. Many of you are familiar with those from Bloom's taxonomy. But the last question, the highest level, and I call it the rocket science question of what we do, how can we develop rigorous, engaging lessons that require higher order thinking skills while using SoftChalk technology? You see that this is an analysis, synthesis, and evaluation question of Bloom's taxonomy. We're working at the upper levels using all of our brain cells to try to do this. So that's a very important question that we're examining today. And the computer is not responding once again, Steve. I wonder, maybe we have a lot of people engaged here. Maybe that's part of it, of why it's so slow.
Should not be.
Shouldn't be, huh?
Problem. I mean,
Yeah.
people were suggesting Control-Alt-Delete, left or right arrows,
Left arrow, right arrow's not working. Let's see. Control-Alt-Delete will get me out of that, but
yeah,
I
maybe
don't think
maybe
I want to move out of the webinar.
And launch it again.
Okay. Well,
something's going on.
Okay. Duke tip, real quickly. I'm going to go fast through this, but we are a nonprofit educational organization, and we work along with schools, K-12, independent, and public, to serve kids. We have a lot of programs, face-to-face programs. I work in the online independent study program, which is related to what a lot of people here do, I'm sure, when you're delivering online learning. And independent study, so what the students do is they access our curriculum and they learn it completely by themselves. So what we write in SoftChalk has to really speak to them. It has to be meaningful. It has to pop off the page. It has to be written to the students. And of course, because it's for gifted students, this is who we advocate for, students who are learning 2 to 4 grades above grade level. We need to make sure that we've really accelerated and enriched. And for many of you who are in higher education, you'll find that a lot of the materials we're doing are pretty high level, so hopefully that'll be of interest to you. And what you'll see today is going to be delivered through Blackboard, but typically what we do, and we are producing courses all the time, we deliver them to our web server, the students get a username and password, login, and SoftChalk materials are displayed there. And if you aren't teaching science, which is the model course I'm going to be focusing on to show you how we use Bloom's taxonomy, you might be interested in our math, our writing, our Greek mythology, our world literature and American literature courses, because at our website we have a lot of samples of how we've used SoftChalk to do higher level learning. And in particular, we're releasing a course this May to our students called Discovering Science and Medicine, Epidemiology, Disease and Outbreak, coming out in May. You're going to see this course in its not its rough draft, it's almost final draft, as it's being delivered in Blackboard, which is where we field test with students before we actually release it officially to the public. So you're getting kind of a sneak peek. But if you're interested, you can go to our website, and there's lots of free sample lessons there, and you can see how we are using SoftChalk there. So first understanding of this presentation, if you walk away with a couple things, I hope you'll walk away with this. If we want to create high-level lessons using SoftChalk, what we need to do is we need to hang out in the upper realms of Bloom's taxonomy. And as you all know, SoftChalk can only be as smart as us. So if we don't do some intensive and thoughtful lesson design before we hit SoftChalk or while we're using SoftChalk, then the students are going to be hanging out in the lower realms of Bloom's taxonomy and not using all their brain cells. Now, quickly, Bloom's taxonomy, I know many of you are familiar with it, but just it's interesting the history of it. Benjamin Bloom, in the 50s, when he was developing it, it was because the college examination questions needed a facelift. And more than that, actually, they needed to have a brain lift. They were mostly recall and explanation types questions, and so he and his group of folks got together and created a continuum of how to coach students to think, elemental to advanced thinking skills. So it's a continuum that's been around since the 50s. And then in 2001, Anderson and Kraftwall got together and said, we need to revise it, tweak some words, rethink the hierarchy a little bit. But the most important thing I want you to walk away with is remembering that, of course, all the levels are essential to learning. And that this taxonomy, this hierarchy, that you've seen before, all of it's essential in the learning process. We've got lower order skills, which the first one being remember. In the old taxonomy, it was know. So I interchangeably go between remember and know. The second level is understand or comprehend. Next level, apply those bits and bytes of data that you've just mastered and memorized and taken in. Then analyze, evaluate, and create. Some of you may have heard synthesis before, and that's the top level here, create or synthesize. And many people debate whether create or evaluate should be who's in the top position there. I have a colleague here at work who really feels evaluate, judging by criterion. That really should be the top level. I would agree with that some days, but I also think that synthesis and evaluation are both kind of hanging out in the same realm, so they almost could be parallel to each other. If you're interested, when you finish the webinar, you can go to the source at the bottom. This PDF has a lot more interesting information if you want to explore Bloom's a little bit more. So let's take a quick poll. Which of the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy is hardest for you to teach? And by the way, please forgive the train here in Durham, North Carolina that's passing by us at Duke University. We're right near the train tracks. So Steve is opening the poll, and I'm just curious to see which word on the taxonomy gives you the most inspiration, curiosity, frustration as you're trying to design a challenging lesson. So just quickly tell us that. I'd like to see, and then Steve, if you can give me a little report, because I'm not sure I can see the poll reporting in my view.
No,
that would be great.
Can't, not easily anyway. And at this point, about 2/3 have voted or responded, and 55% of them are saying synthesis creation. And application is 9%, analysis is 20%, and evaluation is 23%. I'm going to close it, and I'm going to post it so everybody can see it.
So creation or synthesis is really is where we have an issue, or people are most intrigued in learning more. Well, that's great. I find this is why I called it rocket science before. If we're really going to design interesting, creative products and performances that our students have to produce, we have to do a lot of thinking on the front end of how, and be really great guides on the sides while they actually create them. And in online learning, we have to set up all the steps and the necessary support so that they can do that appropriately. So thanks for that, Steve. That was interesting. I'll reference a little bit more of that later when we talk about the higher levels in our epidemiology class. So when you're designing lessons, and what we do here at TIP, we focus on the verbs. What will the student be doing? Not what will the teacher be doing, because we have to worry, the online curriculum speaks for itself, right? So these verbs have to be top-level verbs that the students will be doing. We pose questions and for all of our activities and assessments that use verbs like these. Explain, categorize, distinguish, support your reasoning, what assumption, relate. Now this is all in the analytical realm, so the fourth level of the taxonomy. Then you go to synthesize and create, and which many people marked as a tough one, along with evaluate. Create, suggest, propose a plan, develop, think of a way. What conclusion can you draw? What can you formulate as a solution? Put together. What if? Speculate. So we got to leave room for our students to do a lot of synthesis type activities and really design something that is their own. They own the curriculum, or rather the content and skills by the end. And finally, evaluate, depending on where in the hierarchy you want to put this, but it's definitely upper realms. They are judging, deciding, making moral and ethical and taste and preference decisions. They're making high-level decisions usually by a body of criteria or rubric. So again, those are the type of verbs we want to deal with. Now this is not all about Bloom's, this presentation, so I wanted to leave a few resources for you, and so at the end of this presentation you'll have access to these links if you want to do a little bit more investigation. If I could point you to one of the four, the last bullet, the task-oriented question construction wheel from St. Edward's, is a wonderful polygon graph of, or rather icon, that has all the verbs tailored to the 6 levels, and it's really a helpful reference thing to have in your desk as you're designing a lesson, so I recommend that. So at TIP, when we design lessons, here are the questions we ask. First of all, what will the kids, or the adult learners in many people's cases, what will they be able to know and do by the end of this lesson? And how are the assessments we're giving, the products, the performances, the activities, all the assignments, how are they letting students demonstrate that knowledge and skill? What are they going to understand, and what are they going to explore throughout this unit? And if you recognize these questions, these come from Understanding by Design and the backwards planning method. You'll notice that we're not talking at all about the teacher here. We want to know what the students will be able to know and do, the content and skill objectives, and then we go into the assessments and understanding. So before we get into SoftChalk here, I want to give one other point about lesson design. We also ask a tip, what are the real world roles of the discipline? What do people do, you know, scientists? What do mathematicians, nurses, novelists, architects do? And so we ask that question. We talk to experts in the field, such as architects, epidemiologists. We get all that information from them, and then we create activities where the students are playing the roles of the discipline, where they're required to analyze like nurses and scientists do, or create or synthesize like architects do, and finally make evaluative decisions. So in Discovering Science and Medicine, these are the roles the students play. They get to be the gumshoe disease detective, the epidemiologist. They step into the role of a physician, microbiologist, researcher, statistician, writer, media liaison, and educator. Now, these are 5th, 6th, and 7th graders, and our curriculum is pitched a couple grade levels above that grade span. So you can imagine it's kind of a high school level course, essentially, and we're actually placing them in these roles. So we want to make sure that Bloom's in action is we're helping students become scientists, essentially, since that's the conceptual basis of the course. How, by the end, do we know that they're going to be making more careful observations, using increasing accuracy, good record keeping, see patterns in data, doing logical reasoning? These are all the skill goals that we're looking at. And you can see here all the bits and bytes of data that they'll walk away with. They need to know what a good graph looks like. They need to know mathematical terms like statistics, mean, median, mode, quantitative versus qualitative data, hypothesis, independent and dependent variables. And also they need to know how to design a good experiment. So you can see just some of the things I'm just clicking through real quickly, the content basis and the skill basis of the course. And then here are the high-level questions. Look at the third from the bottom. This is a high-level question that scientists deal with in the real-world disciplines. How do the fallibility and limits of the senses influence the investigation of natural phenomena? Now that's a mouthful, you would think, for a 10 or 11-year-old, but with gifted kids and with a lot of learners, depending on how you word it, you can get them exploring this question throughout a course. So before I take you into SoftChalk, I want to show you a real quick overview of how we use the SoftChalk tools to hang out first at the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, and then in the second part I'm going to show you how we go to the higher levels. So first of all, we pre-test students. We want to know what they already know and can do before they start a lesson, because it's possible they could skip to another section. It's a really important part of gifted education, but I think it's applicable to all learners. Find out what they already know with the diagnostic on the first couple pages. Use the SoftChalk tools, multiple choice, true, false, matching quiz groups. Use the labeling, drag and drop activities. Again, on the remember, comprehend, understand level, give them a lot of rich content. We happen to use Crazy Talk software and Camtasia. If you're not familiar with Crazy Talk, I actually learned about it at an Innovator's webinar with SoftChalk. It's great cartoon software to build avatars. So these little cartoon figures, you can also animate people's photos, but that's more complex to do. And these avatar cartoons are little personalities that will accompany our students through the use of the online course. And they're going to deliver content as well through lectures and also commenting on the concepts, and the students feel like they almost have like they actually have an academy of classmates called the Odyssey Exploration Academy that they go through the course with. Also, we take PowerPoints. You're just going to see a simple PowerPoint today, but if you know Camtasia, it animates the PowerPoint and adds the audio. So we record the voiceover, and voila, you have your slideshow lecture. However, in SoftChalk, if you don't want to go to all that trouble, you know you can use the slideshow tool, which allows you to put in the text and the audio as well as the visuals. And finally, on the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, but still, as I said, an essential level, you want to do content delivery and knowledge checks. Link to really rich educational websites, which have videos and quizzes. We use those. We use the text poppers, and I'm going to show you how we do the ordering, word find, and crossword activities too. So let's go ahead and see the tip way using SoftChalk. And the first thing I'm going to show you is our first page, and I'm going to show you here on the screen. And we do this for ourselves, but also for the mentors and the adults. We use the sidebar and hyperlink to the lesson goals. And actually, I'll cancel that because I realized I have it up. We set out all our content objectives, our skill objectives, and also our essential understandings and our essential questions for our students. And they know exactly what they're going to do in the lesson, what they should know and do by the end. So that's the first thing that we do. And then secondly, I'm going to show you now on page 2 the pretest, where we use the SoftChalk tools for the diagnostic. Again, we're in Blackboard. You're not seeing the final version of this course, but we love the SoftChalk tool of the quiz group because it allows us to ask a bank of questions right up front. We want to know, do the kids know about the scientific revolution already? Do they know the traits of a successful scientist? Do they know the difference between a hypothesis and a theory? So you get the idea. We're doing a little diagnosis just before we begin and making sure that the students are actually, ready for this material. Maybe their mentor will have them skip ahead a little bit. Now, as for the avatar cartoons, again, Crazy Talk software, really a great software. We created a bunch of characters here that we thought would be really fun for the kids. In the Odyssey Exploration Academy, we have little personalities, the gadget, the robot, momentum. We're really goofy with puns, by the way. We've got a Russian exchange student named Ivana, I want to know stuff. We've got DNA. We've got Earl, who always cracks terrible science puns and jokes. And we've got Norma Flora, who's really into the environment. DNA is really into art. All the kids have different interests in science, so there's no stereotypical science personality. These avatars serve a number of purposes. They're not there just for humor and visuals. They comment on, for example, they come up with ideas about hypotheses that they should have, because in the end of the course, the students are going to actually have to solve a medical mystery. So they have classmates that are going along with them, analyzing, evaluating, and the student user is trying to decide, should I trust Ivana? Should I trust Mo? So they actually have personalities who they're interacting with. And that's one of the reasons we use it, is to build that narrative. And then on page 8, I'm going to show you something not as polished, but again, another content delivery method, and that is a PowerPoint presentation. But when it's rendered in Camtasia, it's absolutely wonderful. And you have a good voiceover, and we're basically making very important to all our students, especially because they're elementary, middle, and high school, is the importance of taking notes. We do this in every single Duke Tip course. We teach writing skills, the how-to of note-taking, and we find that all the media that you can embed through SoftChalk, whether you use, as I said, the SoftChalk slideshow function, which is already built in and you don't have to mess with another piece of software, those are really, really helpful tools to have to deliver a lot of lecture content very rapidly. So we use that frequently. In fact, I think we have over 50 of these lecture slideshows throughout the course. Then just another quick thing about the avatars. There are professor characters inside the course. So this is Dr. Dusty Tome, and she's going to teach a couple science concepts. And if the students have really paid close attention to everything on this page and the prior page, then they should be able to complete the ordering activity, which is, again, a quick comprehension activity. Do you know what order of events occurred in Western and world history as far as science goes? Was the Islamic Golden Age the first thing that happened in terms of our scientific development as a human race? No, I guess it wasn't. How about Aristotle? Yes, okay, so he's first on the list. So you can see how this is a quick knowledge check that you can provide immediately after you've given, obviously, some rich content to the students, or just a lot of facts, bits, and bytes that you need to check their knowledge very quickly. I talked earlier about linking to rich websites, and the question we're posing is, how science literate are Americans? We want kids to really see that Americans, unfortunately, have a lot of gaps in their science learning and get some of their science information from questionable sources, such as, we joke often, but the Inquirer. So one of the great websites we found was this science literacy test that you can take. And I know all of you probably have a lot of rich, great websites that you can link to, but this is one of the things we love about SoftChalk, is you can just link real quickly, and you say, okay, what about human cloning? Have human beings already been cloned? What do I know about cloning? Have we cloned sheep, goats, rabbits, pigs? Okay, so the kid makes a selection. Oh, I am correct, and then go on to the next question. So it was really easy to embed a little question like that and do that. So that was just a quick tour of the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy as we use it in SoftChalk. And now I'm going to take you into the higher levels and how we use it in SoftChalk. So quick poll question for everybody, because now we're getting into the tough stuff, the creation, synthesis, evaluation, and analysis. If you want to do that regularly with your students, sometimes you have to consider problem-based learning, case studies, simulations, or role-playing. And I'd like to know who's using it, and mark all that apply. Steve's going to open a poll here, and I'd like to see the audience's familiarity with that, if you could. going to escape for a second so I can turn up my mic a little bit and I can hear Steve better.
Okay, well, folks are beginning to respond. About half of them have responded. And it seems clear that problem-based learning is by far getting the highest number.
Oh, cool. Great. All right. Well, then what I'm about to share with you, I think you'll probably enjoy if you're already doing this. By the way,
so let me close the poll and let me share it for a moment. 79% for problem-based learning, 62 for case studies, 43 simulations, and 38 role-playing. It was in exact descending order the way they were listed.
That's great.
So, let me hide it, and you can go on.
Thank you, Steve. That's great. This is 21st century learning, as we all know, even though it wasn't invented in the 21st century. But it's really important, obviously, to have our students be engaging at the highest levels of the taxonomy. And if you know anything about problem-based learning, as many of you do, we need to have our students encounter a real-world problem, allow them to inquire about the nature of it, pursue effective avenues of research, and then acquire all the relevant data to formulate a solution. So one of the first things students do is find out what they already know, then ask, what do we need to know? How do we find it out? What's the issue at hand? And so in our Duke Tip course, we present them with a medical mystery disease outbreak. After they've taken several lessons where they're learning how to design experiments, they're crunching statistics, they're learning about how things work in the ER when somebody diagnoses that someone's sick. So they've been through all these and they've earned their alpha license, their omega license, they've earned their stamps, and then they get to the final lesson and we give them the problem-based learning scenario. And so these are the kind of questions they're going to be presented with, and I'll show you in a minute how we do this in SoftChalk. And I want to credit here lots of different researchers, but one of them that I've borrowed the exact language from is Joyce Van Tassel-Baska. And if you research what she's done, what Sheila and Jim Gallagher have done, and some other great different educators and researchers, there's some very interesting data out there and materials if you want to pursue it further. But what we're designing here is a problem that's complex. It should be ill-structured. There should be rabbit holes and trails that the students have to go through. Door A, or do I choose door B? They have to engage the highest levels of their thinking. And this is why I call it rocket science. Because if you truly are going to design something like this, it takes a lot of thought. You can't just knock it out in a day. We have a whole group of people that have contributed to this. Like I said, we have real epidemiologists and doctors that have given us some thoughts. Other teams of teachers. So we spent a lot of time developing this curriculum because we want it to be effective, high level, and last a long time. As I mentioned before, we had to create avatar characters. We want characters and plot for the students to follow. We have stages of skill practice that occur in timed high-stakes contexts. So this is real people, this matters. That's the kind of energy that you want to have during one of these so the students are feeling inspired to solve the mystery of the problem. And of course, as you see at the bottom, that they're constantly analyzing, synthesizing, creating, and evaluating. So what we gave them was a trouble at the state fair. People are getting sick. This has actually happened here in North Carolina. It may have happened at other state fairs. And so what you're going to see when I take you into SoftChalk is a journal entry where the students are figuring out what they know about what is already going on at the state fair. So they're practicing skills of good observation. And they're, of course, accompanied by their Odyssey exploration classmates. Quickly into, excuse me, the whole fair scenario, Mr. Nash, the state fair director, comes right at them with economic dilemma. He says, hey, this thing costs a lot of money. I can't shut it down. Excuse me, so don't let me shut it down. And take a minute here, you can look at the math challenge that we give the students immediately so they get a sense of the economic impact of a state fair. Interdisciplinary learning, very important because as we all know, real-world learning is not in a vacuum of just one discipline. Say, science is not by itself. It has math in it, it has social sciences implications, it's got writing in it, etc. And so these questions right here, you won't see them so well when we're in Blackboard because they'll be smaller, but these are some of the questions of the reflective thinking that you have to do with every stage of the problem, so we embedded that there too. Again, you can see all the high-level design and thinking that we have to have in order to design it. And then I'm going to show you in just a minute in SoftChalk how the students are hypothesizing. They're building a hypothesis, their avatar classmates are throwing out hypotheses, and then they're given their first choice point of what they're going to do. So are they going to propose a possible cause to the illness early on, or are they going to say, you know what, I want to wait and their answer is not available yet, I want to investigate further. So in SoftChalk in a minute, you're going to see how the students summarize, dissect, compare, and contrast using high-level readings where we have hyperlinked handouts, short answer, and personal journal questions. We hyperlink to Excel sheets with patient data so they can look at the people that are falling sick at the state fair. They go to web resources. They hear from Dr. Really Smart, their virtual mentor, who's a gumshoe epidemiologist. And then we bookmark in SoftChalk using arrows to choose paths. So the students can say, do I want door A or door B here? And we have them create a hypothesis, and the avatars are, of course, with them. And finally, they're going to have to do a press conference, a poster presentation, create answers to the press, create a poster to really show what they think the source of the contagion or illness is. So let's go quickly over to SoftChalk, and you can see in a different page here where I'm going to take you over to, move this aside. On Career Day, the first page of the epidemiology course, the students meet their virtual mentor, the gumshoe epidemiologist. So we filmed Dr. Really Smart, and we made them sure that they knew her CV, that she's really smart, and she's done a postdoc, and give them information about her, and that she's really qualified to also, help them through this. The other thing that we do at the state fair is we do a report from the media, because guess what? A Nancy Grace type reporter has already found out about the disease outbreak at this fair. So that puts a whole nother level of pressure on the students, that they high stakes time contest, and you've got to solve it quickly. And so I'm in your face is the reporter, and I'm going to go through, you see we have cheap labor here. I'm one of the actors, but that's how we can do a lot of different people. But we had people simulate around food trucks that there was actually a state fair, and then we bring up all the economic issues and share that with them. So we give them the high stakes situation, and then we move them to the next page. And notice we do not have the navigation at the bottom or at the top that allows you page 1, 2, 3, 4. We only give them one choice at a time. And so I'm going to click through here, and there's obviously more videos that the students can see, and they actually get a gander at a very serious sign outside the petting zoo, which leads them down a possible rabbit hole of the petting zoo being the source of contagion. And then the students can actually look at some petting zoo footage, and if you can see here, here is the questions that they have to answer. They've got to carefully watch the video, write an informational sheet that could be given to a parent to help minimize the risk of infection for children. What cautions should people take? Also, what else could you do as manager of the exhibit? So already they're doing analytical questions and trying to understand how they could prevent any kind of outbreak from the petting zoo. And then next on page 5, as I predicted before, there's the math challenge, and you get to see Mr. Nash, and he's very nervous, and he's talking to the avatars, and he's pressuring the avatars and the student user to get on this problem right away, please. Okay, so you hear about that. And then on page 6, more analysis and evaluation. Students have to do that reflective and almost metacognitive analysis of what's going on. So we have to really step back and think. We want to teach our students to be very thoughtful learners and to really wonder if the simplest explanation is the best explanation. What do you already know? What don't you know? How could you use technology? So thinking down all those possible trails. And then on page 7, I'm just going through real quickly here, make sure you can see. The last video here is the avatars start discussing all the options with Mr. Nash and what they could do. And then they're given the first bookmarking choice points. So when I say bookmarking, of course, that means you can use the bookmark tools in SoftChalk to send them down to one page or another. So the students hopefully will be thoughtful and not immediately propose a solution to this. They don't have much information. I mean, what have they looked at? Just the petting zoo footage, and they've seen a scary sign. So we do not want to raise kids who are bad scientists and just leap to conclusions. So we really hope, and of course they can always go back and redo this, because the way the course is structured, they can come back and there's a replay value to it, obviously. But they can go to, hopefully, not proposing a solution, not yet, and make some decisions there. And one of the things they're going to do is develop a questionnaire. All the people who fell sick, do they have anything in common? Let's look at some patterns here. And so we give them some suggested questions, because remember, they are 10, 11, 12, and they need some models. And so, is it a good question, bad question? We're using here the text poppers, which are a really great little function in SoftChalk where you can embed a lot of data just right around a question. So we give them a whole bunch of choices and some models, and then we send them off to make their own. Excuse me. And then, just taking one more page here, they have some data about ill patrons that they can look at. And they can begin their analysis here. How long was the person at the fair? How do they feel? So this is just the beginning of several pieces of data. And this is a lesson of, I think, about 40 pages. So by the end, you know, when they're facing the press and they're making a poster presentation to Mr. Nash to explain to him how they think people got sick, they will have looked at tons of data. They will have made several different rabbit hole choices. Different avatars will have been advising them, no, my hypothesis is right. I think people were getting sick because of X. No, I think it's this. And they look at all the aspects of the fair that might have sickened people. So this is just my real quick tour of this. If we had a little bit more time, I might even take you through more. But I thought what I would do is take us back here and see what questions we have.
Okay, well, thank you. There's been a couple questions, and let me focus on the questions about making your content and perhaps your PowerPoint available. In the email that follows up with this you'll get tomorrow, you'll get the link you're looking at right now. But several people have asked about whether or not there was a specific page you put up where there's St. Edward's information, etc. So there, the question is, how can they get access to that specific information and possibly the PowerPoint?
And Steve, I think you and I had a plan to post all this afterwards, right? I remember we discussed.
Yes, we did, and I guess we have to figure out how to do that when we get off here. And in the email you will get tomorrow, we will have a link to wherever the content is. We'll probably put something on SoftChalk Connect and embed the PowerPoint inside that, something like that.
And also, as I said, if you do go hang out in any of these links at tip.duke.edu, we'll have a sample of the course I was just showing you available, and you can just go to the independent learning section of our site and see a lot of other sample lessons too in SoftChalk there.
Okay, a couple of questions are coming in. One call by Don Brown said, "This sounds like awesome courses." So I just wanted to post
Oh,
that.
thank you. We hope the kids think so too.
Let me see. There's a question about how much it takes to create these lessons. These lessons are a lot more work than the average lesson that we see made in SoftChalk. You've got a team behind them. Want to talk a little bit about the development of the courses?
Yes, my job has been to hire a curriculum developer, a curriculum editor. I'm also an editor. We have a copy editor too. We had a videographer, but I'll tell you, 5 years ago when I started this, there was just me and maybe one other person I would hire. And now the other thing that's the latest development in the last 2 years is the team of academic consultants. We have access to various professors that we ask to serve as consultants throughout the project and read all our materials and vet them and say, yes, this is what people do in the real world. No, this is not what they do. And that's been really helpful. We take over 12 months to develop a course because we hope it will last for 5 to 10 years. Now, STEM courses, science courses, they need to be revised more often than that often, but a lot of the courses we take a very long time to develop, also because we've really gotten into multimedia lately. When I first began, it was a lot more text, images, and hyperlinks. And now, to really create a narrative and a scenario for problem-based learning, we've had to go to the multimedia because, as you know, a lot of our students, especially the younger set, are craving that interactivity or that sense of stepping into a different world. So we do spend a lot of time creating that.
There's a question about team-based learning and whether you use that.
Is the question regarding team-based learning in, having
small groups? Yeah, specifically Maha says team-based learning in small groups of 5 to 7 students in large rooms, similar to PBL, but specific method involved?
Yes, we have actually classroom teachers who take our materials and use them this way. So we're kind of the think tank curriculum creator here at TIP, and then people will get our courses and go use them in face-to-face settings. TIP also does this every summer with its summer camps all over the U.S., so we have this kind of problem-based learning happening all the time. My area is sort of the curriculum feeder to different areas. We also have an online with instructor program that we deliver, e-seminars and e-studies. The students gather via Adobe Connect or Sky and collaborate there on discussion forums and also live in Adobe Connect and do this kind of learning together. So that's another way that it's done.
I'm looking at this. There's a question about how many levels of branching do you use in your scenarios?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, there's about, I think every time we branch, we usually it's 2 options, but at one point, I think the most we do is 3, and that's about all we can handle, because after this first branching that you saw, then the students have 3 options. One is to go back and review the data. Another is to go and look at their classmates' hypotheses, which may be too soon, because we still think they need to gather more data before they start actually forming a hypothesis. And then I think the third option is to do some more research down one particular rabbit hole. We don't usually do more than 3. I think because once then you do the 3, then you have to fill out every rabbit hole or trail there. So when we revise this course, we might add more. But for the first iteration, we felt like this was about as much as we could handle. You also know, you can see that I talked about we had 7 lessons prior that were more traditional lessons where the students were, they do a plant experiment and they learn the experimental design template. They gain a license for that. They learn how to crunch statistics and do a good graph. They earn a license for that. That's not problem-based learning. That's just traditional curriculum where they're mastering high-level skills. And then we say, okay, now 10, 11, 12-year-olds, you're ready for the medical mystery, which has a certain number of branches. There are courses out there that are completely branching, as you know, the whole time from lesson 1 through lesson 10, and we opted not to do that for this one for various reasons. But
some just asked me to talk louder, so I'm going to try to do that. There's a sense of that there's a question about whether or not the lessons that you were showing were the entire course or just part of the course. How do you create content in the lessons and courses and the SoftChalk elements?
Well, it's a 300-page course, and it's comprised of 8 lessons. And you saw excerpts of Lesson 1 and Lesson 8. So you saw from the very beginning, the first few pages, where we were doing kind of the lower levels of the taxonomy, and then I jumped all the way to the final, which was the disease outbreak medical mystery. So there were at least 6 lessons in between you didn't get to see, which go over the career of an epidemiologist. There's one about microbiology. There's one about emergency room medicine. We have one on statistics and graphing. So we have lots of different topics the course covers. And I think there was a second part to that question, Steve, that I might not be answering.
I think you've handled it.
Okay.
Some of the questions, there's another question about the narrative. Do you use the same narrative structure when teaching literature and humanities?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess I wouldn't say it's the same narrative structure, but I can just tell you specifically what we're working on in an English language arts course, a humanities course. It's called Story Writing, Spin Me a Yarn. It'll come out next year. And we have 2 characters. One is Scheherazade from 1001 Arabian Nights, and one is an African griot from Mali in the 15th century. And these narrators will take the students through history, and they will meet 5 characters. And these 5 characters will show up in videos where they all have to interact. Somebody from Nefertiti's time, somebody from Julius Caesar's time, somebody from Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. And all these characters our student users will get to manipulate in various storylines. So after seeing a video, the students will then be asked to follow a writing prompt and figure out a new ending to this character's story, or try to mix it up with these 2 or 3 characters. So that's somewhat similar in that there's an overarching story, but we kind of break the reality every once in a while to let the kids then manipulate the different storylines, because they are practicing to be professional writers. And that goes back to the whole, are they playing the roles of the discipline? So I think the discipline dictates the narrative. We want to immerse the kids. When it comes to a science course, I would say immerse them in a crisis, and they're in it. In fact, this summer, actually, we are doing our first 6th grade crisis program where the students have to deal with an earthquake. It's a day camp for 5 days. And so we, in the science courses online, try to create a coherent, unified storyline that doesn't really get interrupted. I mean, it even has its own news reporters in it. So that would be my advice, I think. You kind of have to let the crisis not break its reality. But in writing course, we do. So.
Let's see. Are there several questions about related like this? Are there common problems, pitfalls students encounter that we should be aware of in advance of setting up our own courses? And sort of unrelated but in the same kind of nature are all the courses synchronous so students interact with each other, or are they asynchronous? How does that work?
Well, I'll take the first one is this is asynchronous. What you're seeing, once the student gets the course, then it's up to the student and the local mentor or teacher to decide whether it's going to be synchronous or asynchronous. We have people who love to use our courses synchronously. They take our curriculum, they go apply it to a face-to-face classroom, and the educators pick or choose different parts to whether they're going to use them. But what I'm actually delivering is meant to be asynchronous and self-paced. I think, oh, Steve, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the first part of the question.
Yeah, are there common problems, pitfalls students encounter?
Yes. Well, when you're live with students doing this, and every time I've done a simulation or a problem-based learning scenario, get ready for a lot of frustration, and you have to really be the guide on the side, coaching and advising patients, and being the resource who continually provides resources and says, okay, why don't we look at this data one more time? Or, let's go to this web link and check this out. Obviously, in what I'm showing you, there's nobody there to do that. So we have to really pack it chock full of resources. And one thing you did not see is the mentor guidelines website. When someone registers for a course, they can register a mentor, an adult, and the adult gets access to a whole website of 100 pages of extra web links, answer keys, other materials that helps coach the individual student or group of students through this course. But yeah, the biggest thing that comes up is frustration. Our students that have been doing 20th century learning for a long time, they're not ready for this. And a lot of them in this age too have been handheld, sometimes in families and by parents, to not go to that point of enough frustration where they can jump to the next level. And so as educators, we have to really be okay with our kids getting mad at us, or our adult learners. And the gentleman who designed this course, Scott Byington, fabulous educator, he's been a K-12 educator, but he now is chair of the science department at Central Carolina Community College and uses SoftChalk. His whole team uses SoftChalk, and he talks about teaching adult learners, whether they're science or health students, and how they'll get mad at him when he's giving them a problem-based learning scenario, but by day 2 or 3, they get more and more comfortable with going, it's okay to be uncomfortable with not knowing, and I'm going to have to do more research. And, when there isn't cure to AIDS, when there isn't an easy answer to the BP oil spill, if we're making 21st century learners, we've got to make sure that they're uncomfortable sometimes. And sorry, I kind of was long-winded about that, but that's sort of the affective side of what we have to do. Maybe people have other questions related to that. I don't know.
Right. Well, actually, there's a question about how do you respond if a student chooses to make a diagnosis right away rather than wait to gather more information, and if they sort of force on, if they come to the wrong conclusion?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, in our mentor guidelines, we have tips for the coach or the mentor to make sure the student goes back and rethinks things. So we have a whole series of questions that the mentor is supposed to take to the student and discuss with them. And it's easier, obviously, in a face-to-face situation where you can say, you feel comfortable about that? And then, or asking that student to move to a different group where they can hear some other thoughts, maybe even pushing them ahead to another place where they can see one of the avatars giving a different hypothesis. Now, working in SoftChalk, I think what you can do is, I will tell you this, what happens when they choose the easy route and try to quickly make a diagnosis or a decision, they're immediately thrust in front of the media. And that's a pretty easy to fail situation, and they quickly realize that the media has really rough questions for them that they're not prepared to answer. So that's kind of how we set it up. That's one of the things. But that there are a lot of different ways you can do it in SoftChalk. You can have pages with reflective questions where you say, do you sure you want to go here? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? It's the nice thing about the bookmarking and the way you can use the navigation tools in SoftChalk is to push them back to different places.
Right. Well, we've answered most of the questions. A couple of technical ones. Can a flip video camera be used? Is it adequate in terms of the video you want to produce?
We have some, yeah, I think you could definitely use it. We have some great, very cheap flip video cameras we've used. We decided because this course lasts for about 5-10 years and it's out there as part of our Duke Tip brand, we go ahead and put the money into the videos. But I would say if you're needing to be nimble and do quick videos, I would definitely use a flip camera. And if you have students you're interacting with, you could also put in some things where they have to actually find videos and post them to YouTube and as part of their research. They could go out and film things. They could also go out and find materials and post them. If you have like a learning management system, you can make it even more interactive where the students are bringing in resources. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about doing a lot of extra production if you don't have the time.
I think we pretty much have handled most of the questions. There's a few that we don't have time to do, and some that we've answered already. So we're going to take a look at all these questions because we will take a look at them afterwards, and if there's some that we haven't responded, either Lynn or I will get back to you on them. So hopefully you will be patient because there's a couple other things at the very end of this as I turn it back over to me. You will see and let's see if I can put this back up. Okay, so there's a question was just asked about how well this works with Blackboard, how seamless is this integration, how much time does it take, and how difficult is it to take a 400-page lesson and put it into Blackboard. Those are already technical questions about how SoftChalk works in a variety of ways, and there's a lot you can do in terms of getting that information. Our website has a vast amount of information. You can come and sign up for our newsletter and like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. So we're into all the media that are ways to connect with us. And if you want a private customized demo, come to our website, and there's a link there to ask for that as well.
And I'll say, Steve, it's really easy to put it in Blackboard. It's much harder to do what we ultimately do, which is put it up on our web server, just because we have a lot of tweaks that we have to do with video streaming. But on Blackboard or Sakai, it's a lot simpler. So, if you have a learning management system, that's great. So.
And folks are asking about, whether we're moving from one LMS to another and how easy is it to do it. Well, the realities are that if you create the content in SoftChalk, then moving from one LMS to another becomes a trivial problem as opposed to if you embed your content in one of the basic learning management systems and it's native to it.